The Magician's Universe. The soul goes round upon a wheel of stars, and all things return. Good and evil go round in a wheel that is one thing and not many. Do you not realize in your heart, do you not believe behind all your beliefs, that there is but one reality and we are its shadows, and that all things are but aspects of one thing, a center where men melt into man and man into God? No, said Father Brown. G.K. Chesterton, The Dagger with Wings. Man is made in the image of God, and it has often been sardonically observed that God is made in the image of man. Both statements are accepted as true in magic. Man can make himself God because he has the divine spark within him. He is a miniature image of God, and God is man writ large. Aleister Crowley defined God as the ideal identity of a man's inmost nature, something ourselves, I erase Arnold's imbecile and guilty not, that makes for righteousness, and the great work is the raising of the whole man in perfect balance to the power of infinity, at which point he becomes God. Another notorious sorcerer, the great Renaissance magician Cornelius Agrippa, writing about 1510, asked how it was possible for a man to wield magical powers, and answered, quote, "No one has such powers but he who has cohabited with the elements, vanquished nature, mounted higher than the heavens, elevating himself above the angels to the archetype itself, with whom he then becomes cooperator and can do all things." Unquote. This ideal identity or archetype is the fundamental unity which magicians see behind all the apparently diverse and disorderly phenomena of the universe. The world we live in may seem to be a rag-bag of odd, fortuitously assembled bits and pieces, but magicians believe that it is really a whole, like a design or a machine, and that all its parts are necessarily connected together in a certain way. Human beings are wholes of this kind. A man is made of many different things. His body and appearance, his mental and spiritual characteristics, his moods, his humor, his different ways of expressing himself at different times and in different circumstances. But these are all linked together into one organism with one underlying personality. In magic, the universe is a human organism on a colossal scale. Just as all the facets of a man's character and behavior are aspects of a single personality, so all the phenomena of the universe are aspects of some one thing which underlies and connects them. This one thing is a being, a force, a substance, a principle, or something which it is not possible to describe in words at all. It is the One, or God. The universe and everything in it constitutes God. The universe is a gigantic human organism, and man is a tiny image of it, a toy replica of God. Because he is a miniature of the universe, by a process of spiritual expansion, a man can mystically extend his own being to cover the entire world and subject it to his will. It is because all things are aspects of one thing that all things are grist to the magician's mill. The complete man, who has experienced and mastered all things, has vanquished nature and mounted higher than the heavens. He has reached the center where man becomes God. The achievement of this is the great work, the supreme magical operation which may take a lifetime or many lifetimes to complete. In this unified magical universe, mysterious forces are at work, moving beneath the external fabric of things like the invisible currents of the sea. Their effects are all around us, but most of us do not recognize their true nature. The universe is man on a huge scale, and the impulses which move man, love, hate, lust, pity, the urge to survive, the urge to dominate, are found on a much greater scale in the universe. For instance, all things contain a greater or lesser amount of life force, an immensely powerful drive which impels life to continue. It shows itself in the instinct of self-preservation, in the urge to survive, the struggle of everything in nature to cling to life even in cruel and hopeless conditions, and in the universal urge to procreate, to ensure life's continuation by reproducing one's own kind. Magicians also see a force of violent destructive energy in the universe, which is a greater counterpart of man's destructive impulses and lies behind every form of savagery, bloodshed, warfare, and havoc. These forces are named for gods and planets. The life force is called the force of the sun, because the sun's light and heat are necessary for the existence of all life on earth. The violent destructive force is named for Mars, the Roman god of war. The great moving forces of the universe are described and classified in various ways. Magicians who follow the theory of a mysterious body of doctrines called the Kabbalah list 10 of them. Until fairly recent times, astrologers believed in 7 major forces, which they connected with the sun, the moon, and 5 planets. They now have 9 or 10, adding Uranus and Neptune and sometimes Pluto. Numerologists list 9 forces, which they connect with the numbers from 1 to 9. The magician masters these forces by experiencing them, by absorbing them into his own being and subjecting them to his will. He can do this because the forces are inside him as well as outside him. They are his own impulses magnified. The channel between his inner impulses and the forces outside him is his imagination, and a powerful imagination is his most important single piece of equipment. His powers of concentration are also vitally important. He must be able to focus the whole force of his being on a single aim, a single idea. He trains his powers of imagination and concentration to an abnormal pitch of efficiency by various techniques. The importance of concentration in magic is reflected in the old belief that you can recognize a magician by the fixed stare of his eyeballs. If a magician wants to turn the current of destructive energy associated with Mars against an enemy, he sets his imagination to work to construct an intensely vivid mental picture of the force. Everything available to him which will contribute to this picture is used: gestures and dancing, drink, drugs, sex. He chants incantations which state the nature and attributes of the force of Mars. He fills his mind with images of blood and torment, rage and ruin and pain. If he is thoroughgoing, the mimicry will extend to actual bloodshed and the torture of an animal or another human being. He unleashes all his own inner tides of hatred and violence, and the ceremony gradually works up to a frenzy of savagery in which the force takes possession of the magician's entire being, in which he himself becomes the force, controls it by his will, and hurls it against his victim. Magicians believe that this ceremony, properly performed, will have crushing and scarifying effects on the victim. The theory is that any strong emotion or feeling carries a charge of force which is likely to affect the person at whom it is directed. The effect will vary with the strength of the feeling and the sensitivity of the target. When you sense an emotion radiating from another person, and, as often happens, you seem to understand immediately what that person is feeling, you are reacting to a current of force whose nature you recognize instinctively, as if you were a kind of radar receiver registering invisible waves in the atmosphere. In magic, a wave of powerful emotion is projected with calculated intent by someone who has developed his powers to an abnormal pitch, and according to occultists, the results can be far-reaching. An exceptionally gifted and powerful magician may be able to kill by the sheer force of concentrated hatred, especially if his victim is someone of unusual sensitivity. We recognize that in ordinary life, someone who has a strong personality can make himself obeyed by the force of his will. The same thing is considered true in magic, but to a much greater degree. Man is potentially God, and the human will, wielded by a magician who has learned how to concentrate and project it, has potentially the limitless power of God. As the 19th century French magician Eliphas Lévy put it, "To affirm and will what ought to be is to create. To affirm and will what ought not to be is to destroy." The great forces cannot be described as either good or evil. They have a good side and an evil side, or, in occultist terms, a positive and a negative aspect. The evil side is the province of powerful evil beings called demons. The good side, correspondingly, is the province of the angels, or beneficent spirits, but black magicians are much more interested in the demons. The magical universe is like an ocean. The great tides move through it invisibly, and men are swept about by them, but are sometimes strong enough and clever enough to master and use them. And in the cold black currents which come up from the deeps, there are strange and sinister creatures lurking, evil intelligences which tempt and corrupt and destroy, malignant elementals, astral corpses, zombies, nightmare things which the malice of sorcerers has created, the shells or husks which are the waste products of the universal organism. This is a development of the belief held by many primitive peoples that diseases are evil spirits. The demons are the universe's parallel to the viruses, impurities, and waste products of the human body. Or, from the psychological point of view, they are the universal equivalents of the dark, cruel, animal depths of the human mind. Belief in the existence of evil supernatural beings seems to be instinctive. In all known societies down to modern times, people have believed in demons and ghosts. The fear of something which lies in wait and pounces has a particularly long-lasting hold on humanity. The 7 terrible Babylonian devils called Maskim, which were the evil counterparts of the gods of the planets, just as in modern theory the demons are the evil side of the great occult forces, were beings which lurked in ambush. The Arab ghoul sets traps and waits in hiding, ready to spring. The well-known verses of Psalm 91 probably refer to demons. Quote, "Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday." Unquote. This passage was believed to be a powerful charm against evil spirits. The Egyptian Book of the Dead mentions sinister beings which set snares and work nets and are fishers. Their leader is the god whose face is behind him, which finds an echo hundreds of years later in the devil of the witches' Sabbath, who has a face before and behind. Even today, in an atmosphere of general skepticism about such things, there are probably very few of us who have not felt the presence of the terror by night. Occultists do not believe that demons can be dismissed as products of overactive human imagination, nor do Roman Catholic theologians. There are 2 streams of magical tradition about the devil and his angels. In one tradition, the devil is the magician's god, as in witchcraft, and his favor is won by worshipping him and doing his will. In the other, the demons are evil intelligences which have great power, but which can be dominated by a magician who is sufficiently strong and daring. Demons are subdued by the force of the magician's will in rituals of blood and sacrifice, perfumes, symbols, and curses. These operations are said to be extremely dangerous. Fear of the dead is another old terror, and graveyards are still not widely regarded as pleasant places at night. Prehistoric burials have been discovered in which it is clear that the corpse was tied up in a cramped, fetus-like position soon after death. When modern primitives do this, it is usually to prevent the dead from coming back to attack the living. The same motive may lie behind prehistoric burials of bodies in jars or under heavy stones, to stop something from getting out. The Sumerians and their successors in Mesopotamia, the Babylonians and Assyrians, believed that if a corpse was not properly buried with the appropriate ceremonies and gifts, it would come back and stalk the streets, attacking the living and trying to suck their blood. The Greeks thought that offerings must be made at the graves of dead relatives, whose ghosts would take revenge if they were neglected. The art of controlling the spirits of the dead is necromancy, which is also extremely dangerous. Modern occultism brings in the notion of the astral corpse. When a man dies, his body remains on earth, but in his body of light, a replica of the earthly body made of finer and subtler material, he goes to a mysterious ethereal plane of existence which is called the astral plane. His soul eventually mounts to still higher planes, leaving the body of light in the astral plane as an astral corpse. Just as the earthly body retains enough innate life force to grow its nails and hair for a time after death, the astral corpse retains a faint spark of life. It has an intense desire to live again, like the Mesopotamian vampire corpses which would suck people's blood to recover life, and it can be attracted back into the normal world either consciously by necromancy or sometimes unconsciously. It can then absorb enough life energy from living creatures to prolong its shadowy existence almost indefinitely. Some occultists believe that spiritualist seances really summon not spirits, but astral corpses. Another important magical theory about the universe is the doctrine of opposites. The early Greek philosophers were impressed by the existence of pairs of opposites in nature. They saw that the life of the universe seems to move in pendulum swings. Day gives way to night, and summer to winter, calm follows storm, what is born must eventually die, and what grows strong will in time grow weak. But they did not think that the universe could be entirely explained in these terms. They believed that there was something more fundamental than the opposites, something which held them in balance so that the pendulum swung regularly to and fro, from day to night and back to day, something of which the opposites were themselves a part. The magician's search is for this something which underlies and connects the opposites, the mysterious one which reconciles all diversity in unity. The path to the one lies through the reconciliation of opposites. To experience and master all things is to experience and reconcile opposites, good and evil, the spiritual and the material, freedom and necessity, reason and passion, laughter and tears. In magic, as in the Hegelian dialectic, progress comes through the reconciliation of opposites, thesis and antithesis, in a synthesis which transcends them. The Greeks called a perfect balance between opposites justice, and magicians have a correspondingly high regard for exact balance and equilibrium. To achieve a reconciliation of opposites, there must be a perfect balance between them. I cannot reconcile the forces of love and hate in my own nature unless I have brought them both to an equal pitch. Otherwise one will outweigh the other, and no true synthesis will be obtained. The magician tries to bring all the forces of his being into a proper balance. He must not, for instance, devote himself to reason and intelligence at the expense of his instinctive drives, his passions and emotions. Many magical ceremonies are deliberately designed to summon up and unleash the animal driving forces from the deeps of human nature. The whole man is to be raised to the power of infinity, not man as civilized thinker, or man as ravening beast, but man as a combination of both. One of the occult applications of this theory of opposites and balance is in the area of sex. The stock occultist's example of progress through the reconciliation of opposites is the union of male and female, the two opposites, which results in the creation of new life, a child. Eliphas Levi remarked that generation is in fact a work of the human androgen. In their division, man and woman remain sterile. It is not merely that man and woman are physically sterile if kept apart. In magical theory, they are also spiritually sterile. There is an old tradition that man was originally bisexual. A Jewish legend says that Adam was a man on his right side and a woman on his left, and God separated the two halves. In another version, Adam and Eve were originally joined at the shoulders, back to back, and God split them with an axe. These stories were intended to reconcile the existence of two sexes with the belief that man was made in the image of God. God, or the One, cannot be described as either masculine or feminine. The One links all the opposites together in unity, and it combines male and female. If man was made in God's image, he must originally have been bisexual. The magician cannot become the One unless he becomes bisexual. One step towards this is for the male magician to cultivate the female side of his nature, but without impairing his masculinity, and the female magician, vice versa, carried to the point of deliberate homosexual activity in some cases. Another method is copulation. In a sense, the beast with two backs is a bisexual creature, a human androgen, and copulation in which man and woman are joined into one being can therefore be a mystical approach to the One. This idea should not be written off as merely an ingenious justification for sex orgies. The feeling that sex is sinful, dirty, and utterly unworthy of the realm of the spirit and the divine is entirely foreign to magic, as it was foreign to the pagan world in which magic has its roots. On the contrary, in antiquity it was thought that just as in man new life is the result of copulation, so all life in the universe is the result of the sexual activity of the gods. There are numerous myths which describe the creation of the world as the result of a copulation between gods. Aeschylus and the Danaids saw the life of nature as the offspring of the union of earth and sky. Quote, "Holy sky passionately longs to penetrate the earth, and desire takes hold of her to achieve this union. Rain from her bedfellow sky falls and impregnates the earth, and she brings forth for mortals pasturage for flocks and Demeter's livelihood." Unquote. Among the Sumerians 4,000 years ago, the king went through a rite of sacred copulation each year with a priestess who represented Inanna, the goddess of procreation, to ensure that the land of Sumer and its people would be fruitful and prosperous in the coming year. The same rite is found in many other societies. When sexuality is admitted into the world of the divine, it is possible to think of union with the divine in sexual terms, and many Christian mystics have spoken of union with God in these terms. In the pagan mystery religions, union with the god was often achieved symbolically by sexual intercourse. An essential element of witchcraft is sexual union with the god, the devil. Among the witches of the primitive Ozark Hill country in the United States, initiation as a witch involves intercourse with the devil's representative, a man who is already a member of the cult. A woman who decides to become a witch goes to her family burying ground at midnight in the dark of the moon. There she formally renounces the Christian faith and offers herself body and soul to the devil. She strips naked and copulates with the man who is responsible for teaching her the secrets of the cult. Both of them repeat certain words, which are believed to attract demons and ghosts of the evil dead, and the ceremony ends with the recitation of the Lord's Prayer backwards. It is repeated for 3 nights in succession, and must be witnessed by at least 2 other initiates who are also naked. The ceremony is far from being merely a sex orgy. Vance Randolph, who investigated the Ozark witches, was told by women who had experienced both that, quote, "the witch's initiation is a much more moving spiritual crisis than that which the Christians call conversion." Unquote. Magical ceremonies designed to release the driving forces from the depths of man's being naturally tend to be heavily spiced with sex. The sex drive is a powerful force in man, and correspondingly in the universe, which the magician must experience and control. Inhibitions and repressions are obstacles to the development of the complete man and must be swept away. Magic takes a pagan delight in the pleasures of the senses, but magical theory insists that sensual indulgence for its own sake will not serve the magician's purpose, and it is interesting that many witches said that intercourse with the devil was extremely painful. If the magician lets himself be carried away on the tides of desire, he has failed to achieve the perfect balance of opposites from which magical progress comes. One of the most deeply reverenced of magical documents is the Emerald Table of Hermes Trismegistus. Magicians who deal in mysteries are always enthralled by anything which is exceptionally mysterious, and the Emerald Table is impenetrable in the extreme. It is said to have been a tablet of emerald, engraved with writing in Phoenician characters, which was discovered by Sarah, the wife of Abraham, or alternatively by Alexander the Great, in a cave tomb, where it was clutched in the fingers of the corpse of Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes was the Greek god of wisdom and patron of magic. Hermes Trismegistus, thrice greatest, was supposedly a grandson of Adam, a sage of surpassing wisdom, and the builder of the pyramids. A Latin version of the Emerald Table was in existence by 1200, and earlier Arabic versions have been discovered. No two translations of it agree, and none of them make very much sense, but for magical purposes, the important part of it is the opening sentence of the Latin version. Quod superius est sicut, quod inferius, et quod inferius est sicut, quod superius ad perpetranda miracula rei unius. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, to achieve the wonders of the one thing. This is the great magical doctrine of as above, so below, which is the foundation of the art of astrology. It is one way of putting the theory that man is the earthly counterpart of God. As God is in heaven, so man is on earth. It is also a statement of the old belief that events on earth parallel the doings of the gods in heaven. Events on earth run parallel to events in heaven because both depend on the workings of the same force, the one thing, which reconciles the opposites of above and below, like two wheels turned by the same cogwheel. Astrology developed originally in Mesopotamia, where each city-state had its own patron god, and every change in the balance of power between the city-states was seen as the direct reflection of a change in the relationships of the gods. Modern astrology is built on this same belief, with the planets substituted for the old gods, because the Babylonians and Assyrians connected their principal gods with the planets. For example, a conjunction of Jupiter, the planet of health, with the two malevolent planets, Saturn and Mars, is a portent of plague. In the 14th century it was thought that the terrible Black Death of 1348 had been signaled by one of these conjunctions in 1345. It was later accepted that another conjunction of the three planets heralded the arrival of syphilis in Europe. Modern astrologers say that a man who is born when Venus is close to the sun in the zodiac is likely to be effeminate. Femininity, Venus, affects his personality, the sun. And if Saturn is opposite the sun in the sky, he will catch cold with unusual frequency because Saturn is the coldest planet, the one furthest from the warmth of the sun, or it was until the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Napoleon's tendency to overeat could have been predicted from the fact that Venus was in the sign of Cancer when he was born. Venus stands for love, and Cancer rules the stomach, so Napoleon was naturally afflicted with undue love of his stomach and its pleasures. These are cases of as above, so below reasoning, but the converse, as below, so above, is also important. Events in the sky are signals of events on earth, but it is equally true that occurrences on earth are evidence of conditions in heaven. By inspecting the markings on a sheep's liver, I can discover whether the gods or the stars are favorable for any enterprise which I have in mind. This is the basis of many highly eccentric methods of predicting the future, because any event, however trivial and apparently meaningless it may be, can give a clue to the direction in which the universe as a whole is moving. The ancients drew omens from the internal organs of animals, dreams, lots, the shapes taken by oil or flour dropped on the surface of water, unusual events like monstrous births, and the movements of animals and birds. Agnes Sampson, a famous Scottish witch who was executed in 1590, used to predict whether sick people would recover or not by watching the behavior of a large black dog. Plutarch, who lived at the turn of the 1st and 2nd centuries A.D., said that the Egyptians drew omens from the chance remarks of children. The 13th century astrologer and magician, Michael Scott, believed that sneezes are portents of the future. If you sneeze twice or 4 times when you are involved in some business venture, and you immediately get up and walk about, the venture will be successful. When a contract has been drawn up, if you sneeze once, it will be kept, but if you sneeze 3 times, it will be broken. Sneezing twice in the night for 3 successive nights is a sign of death in the house. Modern methods of fortune-telling are just as odd, if not odder, and depend on the same theory of the universe. Books which tell you how to interpret dreams, palms, playing cards, or tea leaves can be found in many bookshops and public libraries. A curious technique is mole-osophy, divination by moles on the body. If you have a mole on the right side of your forehead, you are talented and likely to succeed. But if it is on the left side, you are stubborn, extravagant, and dissipated. A mole on the right knee means a happy marriage. On the left knee, bad temper. On the right hand, success in business. On the left hand, the curse of an artistic temperament. These rules come from a book published in the United States with perfect seriousness in 1945. All these methods, which seem to involve random events, the chance remarks of children, a sneeze or two, a mole on the body, depend on the belief that the events are not random at all. The universe is a whole, a great design. Any event which occurs is part of the design and can be used to predict events in the future because they are also parts of the design. The principle of as below, so above is not limited to fortune-telling. Events above and below run in parallel courses. By manipulating events here below, I can affect the course of events above. At Rome in 1628, Pope Urban VIII employed a magician called Tommaso Campanella, an ex-Dominican friar who had earlier been imprisoned for heresy, to ward off an eclipse which the Pope feared would be the signal for his death. Campanella and the Pope sealed off a room against the outside air and draped it in white hangings. They used 2 lamps to stand for the sun and moon and 5 torches for the planets. They assembled jewels, plants, and colors connected with the benevolent planets Jupiter, Venus, and the sun, drank liquor which had been distilled under the influence of Jupiter and Venus, and played jovial and venereal music. They were trying to create their own little favorable sky in the sealed room in place of the hostile real sky outside, either to prevent the eclipse from occurring at all, or at least to guard the Pope, who was in the sealed room, against its effects. Their efforts were evidently successful, as Urban VIII did not die until 1644.